Welcome back to the RMB News Report radio broadcast for Wednesday, January 23rd, 2013. I want to talk about an organization which I am very familiar with, and what brings this to mind is I've received a communication from a gentleman, Bill Terry 967. You can find him on YouTube. And the organization, and I thank Terry for bringing this up, because this organization is called Oath Keepers. And what a better time for me to talk about this organization and what it is and what the people that are involved and what it's all about. Now, if anyone out there has ever been in the military, specifically, then you know that upon entering the military, everyone, be they in the Navy, the Army, I was in the Army, and I have very fond memories of those times. But whether you're in the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, the Coast Guard, the National Guard, you are all required to swear an oath. And I want to refer you to the website of this organization, which is known as oathkeepers.org. If you will key in on Google, Oath Keepers, all one word, oathkeepers.org. And that's spelled OATHKEEPERS. Now, if you are a patriot and you have been in the military, and you will remember that oath that you took to support and protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that is a very serious oath that we take as patriots when we join the Army, or back when you were drafted during the Vietnam era and there was still a draft in existence. But nowadays, since the Vietnam era, everyone they volunteer for the service. So it's not like you didn't want to be there. But the oath that is required of every soldier, now there's two oaths. There is the officer's oath, and there's the oath that is for the enlisted men. And I want to start out with reading the enlisted man's oath. Theirs is a little bit more in length, and also a little bit more complicated, and requires a little bit of explanation. And then I will discuss the officer's oath. But before I do that, again, I want to repeat that this organization is known as the oathkeepers.org. And during my discussion on the oath, I will be discussing why this organization is so important at this time in American history. Now, everybody who is a veteran has sworn an oath. The oath of enlistment is as follows. I state your name. Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Now, let's discuss that oath of enlistment before we go on to the officer's oath. Now, in the first portion it says, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Now, There's a good reason why that portion of the oath comes first, because it is in the order of importance. The Constitution of the United States is above everything else. It is above the President. It is above the other officers that you serve under as an enlisted man or as an officer, a junior officer. You've always got somebody that's higher ranking than you. But let's suppose, for an example, that as an enlisted man, let's say you are a private, a corporal, every private, every corporal that is in the military has been taught the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Every officer is also aware of that Uniform Code of Military Justice. It is the rules, the law. Now, the Uniform Code of Military Justice covers just about everything that you need to know to govern your life as a military man. It teaches us, for an example, how to treat prisoners of war, how to treat surrendering troops, enemy troops, how to treat civilian population that we encounter, civilians that may drift in and off of the battlefield without knowing that they're wandering in and off of the battlefield. It tells us that we cannot slaughter surrendering soldiers, or if surrendered soldiers are in our care, that we must protect them from anybody who might want to do harm to them. Now, also this oath, this first portion covers in importance. The Constitution is the important part, the most important. And I mentioned the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Now let's say, for an example, that I am a lowly private and I'm out there, on patrol, and I have my lieutenant with me, my sergeant, whomever is above me, let's say a sergeant. And we come upon a little village and we see an enemy soldier in the village. Well, we cannot presume that the entire village is hostile or enemy. We, of course, have to be cautious and careful. But let's say, for an example, that my sergeant tells me, Private, set up that machine gun, kill everybody that you see. Well, even though I'm a private, I kind of got a problem with that, Sergeant. That's not a legal order. And because if there are obvious civilians in the village, you cannot just randomly kill them. Now let's say, for an example, that an enemy soldier ducks into a hut, and there may or may not be civilians in that hut. You don't know because you don't see them. There's a very good possibility that they are in there. But let's say that the enemy soldier is firing from the shelter of that hut. Well, you're kind of put in a difficult position because presumably you're going to return fire to eliminate the enemy soldier, but you also have to consider if there are civilians within that hut. But if your life or the life of your fellow soldiers on patrol is at risk, it may not be possible to avoid inflicting harm upon enemy civilian population. It's kind of like a judgment call, and hope you've made the right decision. But for a higher ranking soldier, a sergeant or a lieutenant, to directly tell you to, whatever civilians you encounter, capture them, line them up against the ditch, and kill them all. That's an illegal order. You cannot comply with that order because that is a war crime. Now let's say that you've got a president in office and the president has gone crazy. He's become a lunatic. And he orders the mass annihilation of a portion of your fellow citizens. Well, I don't I would be in strong disagreement with anybody that said that you are bound to follow those orders from your president based upon this oath of enlistment, because it's an illegal order. Even the president would not have that ability to command that kind of action. Just the same as an officer would not have the right. In other words, you would not have to follow that order because that order is an illegal order. And it's a lot of it is common sense. Okay? You know that it's not right to line civilians up in a ditch and shoot them. That's wrong. Obviously, common sense should tell you that. And the Army generally only takes people with a certain amount of intelligence that they can rationalize and make proper judgments. Now, an officer's oath is a little different. The officer's oath is, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. Now, as a final note to that, as I see on the Oath Keepers website here, they state, your oath never expires. And they close off by saying it's time to keep it. Now, any semi-intelligent, semi-educated person will know that the officer's oath does not include the president. The Constitution of the United States is the most important thing that binds this republic of ours. Without this Constitution, then any president that happens to be slick and conniving enough to gather enough votes from the citizens could do whatever the hell they wanted to. But this Constitution is a contract between a free people and those who are elected by the free people to govern. The office of the president is not a dictatorship. The president does not rule. That is a great misconception, and I heard our most recent president one time in an interview on television with a news reporter where he actually said, I was elected to rule. Well, I humbly disagree. You were not elected to rule. You were elected to govern by the people with their consent. You cannot violate the Constitution because every politician that's sworn into office swears to something very similar to what I just read about the officer's oath, as well as every police officer in this country swears a similar oath. So I want to steer everybody listening to me to the oathkeepers.org website.